Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Well, this week I thought I would showcase and highlight another iconic vintage speaker. So let's go back to the early 70s and actually before that into the 60s when folks were getting information about what were the speakers that sound engineers were using to master records at Capitol Records and Abbey Road, and what were the tools of the trade. And JBL had a speaker called the 4320, which became very well known as the speaker that was used to master lots of those popular songs of the day. Well, JBL not being one to miss a market opportunity, and they decided to release a home version of that, and it's called the Studio Master. And the very first release of that is this speaker, which is known as the L200. Now, it's quite an iconic look. I'm sure if you've seen pictures of it, you probably recognize it, but it set the tone for that, I think, very stylish MCM look. Right away, you see that and that's the reason I turned this on its side here, so you can see it has this angled, sloped front, which very much distinguishes it from everything else. And it's very wide. It is a bit rectangular in shape, but it looks more squared off. Now, what you're seeing here is how they look when you find them most often today, but when they originally sold them, they had a foam grille on the front. And if you're familiar with any of the foam grills of the day, it disintegrates over time. Age, they just don't stand up to time, and they basically just turn to dust. Well, they had sort of vertical slats in them. It was a sculpted foam, and there are third-party manufacturers that reproduce them today. So you can actually get something that looks pretty much exactly how it looked originally and get them back to, their 1970s look. So these were sold originally as a two-way, and I'm sure that you sharp-eyed folks there are looking at it and saying, well, I'm pretty sure I'm seeing three speakers, and that is true. Well, in the mid-70s, in 1975, they produced an upgraded version called the L300. And the L300 is very similar in size. However, it was a three-way speaker. So many fans of the day decided to upgrade their L200s to be L300s. And so that's what we have here, a super tweeter. I think it's, in this case, they used the professional tweeter. I may get this wrong. It might be, I think it's the 2405. And there's an additional crossover on the back that's been added to integrate it in. And it was a very common and well-known upgrade. And that's what was done to this set. Let's see, I think the woofer is an LE15 and the tweeter an LE85, I believe. And these were, if you wanted, that thumping, chest-pounding excitement and those dynamics, they absolutely delivered. I'll tell you that from my perspective, I actually just listened to them. Somebody is purchasing these, but I had decided to try them with and without the super tweeter. And they sound fantastic as a two-way in standard form. If you like them to bristle a little more, that's where the super tweeter comes in, which is what you would expect. And so it adds a little more to the top end, which is not overwhelming, but it's noticeable. And so that's what the differentiation is of these. I just wanted to point that out. They are this set, by the way, this upgrade was actually done by somebody who was working for JBL Professional back then. The original owner just happened to have them as a neighbor. They lived across the street, and maybe that's why they bought these to begin with, knowing that they had a neighbor who was working for, with JBL, and so they bought this home version. I don't know if the upgrade was done right away or after some time. I don't know the history in that much detail, but it's very well executed. It's obvious that somebody knew what they were doing when they installed it. The cutout on the back for the additional crossover is exact proportions. It's not, hacksawed in, if you will. So it's been very well done. But what makes these, to me, so unique is there are some other earlier JBLs that I've had. The Dale is one of those, a bookshelf-sized speaker that just screams MCM. I've showcased those on a prior video. And these are, although they're a floor model, whereas the Dale was a smaller bookshelf, they have that very distinctive MCM design quality and aesthetic to them that's reminiscent of the earlier Dale, which came out in the late 50s. So JBL had, lots of square, monkey coffin offerings, but when they wanted to, they could certainly throw out a design that was distinctive amongst everything else on the market. And I think these have withstood the test of time very well. They still look quite appropriate for, today's MCM appropriate environment. So I think they're a very cool speaker. Now I'm going to show you some pictures of the L300, which had a different grille. It sort of had a grille that wrapped around, the front of it. It had a glass insert top, and distinctive in and of itself as well. Similar, but also different. They are a fairly rare speaker. I don't, I haven't run across them all that much. So these ran from, I think, 1971 to 1977, and there was an L200B that went from 77 to 78. I think that's roughly the time frame. The L300 came out in 1975 and then ran until around 1982. So there was some overlap there, but the L300 being the later model. The L300 was quite a bit more expensive as well. I believed it retailed for around $3,000 at the time, so pretty expensive speaker. Whereas these, the L200, I believe, was around $1,200 or $1,300, and then I think went up to $2,000 as the L200B came out. Some other just quick notable features here. The 15-inch woofer does have a pleated surround, so not something that you have to really worry about replacing. It also has some high-level attenuation here that you can adjust here on the front and change the characteristics of the speaker as well. Also something, if you're going to go into them, something you'll want to clean. It is a pot and you want to deox it occasionally just to keep it working well. And lastly, I think you can see there are two fairly large ports. On the L200B, memory serves, I believe it went down to one port. So some slight modifications on the 200B. If you happen to run across the set, I would recommend picking them up. They are quite distinguishable amongst everything out there, highly collectible. It's a punchy speaker, definitely will bring the dynamics to your room and come in and looking in a classy way as well. Not your typical box speaker that's just going to be, it's just going to look like everything else. You get the appropriate sculpted front grille foam here, and you've got an iconic JBL vintage speaker that you can rave about with your friends. Some other measurements: it is an 8-ohm speaker, but it only has a sensitivity of 80 decibels. So, it does need a little bit of power to get them going, but not a hard speaker to drive. So you probably want to have something, I'd say a minimum of 100 watts amp. I think they're rated at 150, but give it a little power. It doesn't have to be some exotic amp, just something that, is pretty solid, and I think it'll pair up quite well. You'll have an iconic set of speakers. Hook it up with a nice Sansui receiver or a Marantz receiver, and you'll be golden. Well, I think that'll do it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.